walk into the restaurant.
I grabbed a vase and I smashed it with a back of his
One
head.
of those girls on the poster. Papa, did you enjoy the striptease?
He was a liar. He had lied to me about everything.
I think I became a lesbian that night.
Giving me a heart attack. And then he laughed.
The scream is powerful.
We're all gonna die. We're all going to die.
My daughters are giving birth to larvae, and it's my birthday.
I'm just gonna tell it like it is.
And I have no idea if I killed someone. And that's a kind of a weird feeling to have.
We've got to get off the boat immediately. So he explains this to us, and that we all need to hang on to a piece of rope, put our passports in our bathing suits, and prepare to jump on his word.
Tell it like it is.
I guess I was about 24. It was 1995. I've been going to Mexico every winter since I was about 14 because my father lives there. I get the sort of added bonus of having a winter vacation, plus I get to see my dad.
When I was 17, I got this opportunity to be a Rotary exchange student in France. So as quick as I could pack my bag and get out of Dodge, I was there. And I spent an amazing year in France, going to school, did my grade 12 there, or my première, as they call it.
I had met a whole bunch of girls that we'd go to the bars together and drink and dance.
I was at a dance one night, and there was this guy DJing. He was really cute, very handsome. Took me about 8 months, but I stalked him and eventually captured his heart. We had kind of an unorthodox courtship because I was a virgin at the time and chose to remain one. And eventually we decided that we were going to get married. And at the end of the year, I really wanted to extend my stay because I wanted to travel. I decided that I would head off to the northern states first, and then I would hook up with my fiancé, Philippe.
During the last week of my visit, we met this guy named Jeff. That night, I guess it was a Wednesday night, he wandered around and started telling everybody that he had a sailboat and that he was a great sailor, and would we all like to go on a little trip with him to this bird sanctuary island, which was a 3-hour sail away. And we thought that was a great idea because we could snorkel and go sailing, and I'd never been sailing in my life.
So the night before I left, we went out, we had this really romantic dinner, and he gave me this knife. And he said, I hope you never have to use it, but, it's pretty handy to carry around with you anyway. And it was really beautiful. It had a long wooden handle and about a 4 or 5 inch blade, and you could just snap it open and lock it in place. And I said, well, okay, great. And he said, well, you can cut bread and cheese and tomatoes with it anyway, so, it's multifunctional.
By the end of the night, I guess he'd recruited 11 people to come with him on this trip. We stayed out quite late, so when we met in the morning, which was at 7 o'clock, to leave on our little 3-hour tour, we were all very hungover. So we sort of limping up in our bathing suits we find the sailboat. We've all got cases of beer and potato salad and, stuff we'd managed to grab together for this little trip of ours. Jeff puts up the sails and we head out. The water's perfectly blue, the sky's perfectly clear, the sun's out.
The next morning, we packed up, and he took me to the train station. He was headed back to Paris, and I was headed off to Barcelona. And at that time when you traveled, you took a minimal amount of clothes, and I had like my Speedo on, and I had a pair of those pinstriped blue overalls that we all wore in the 70s that had sort of like the painter-style pants. There was a pocket, for your hammer or your, screwdriver or whatever it was supposed to be for, your paintbrush, I guess. And, of course, the knife fit kind of handily in there. So I guess it was about an hour after I was on the train, and a couple of backpacking guys come in, and they sit down, and they have, their big backpacks with their American flags on their backpack. And I'm thinking, oh, great, because I'm so French at this point in time. I'm such a snob. But they're really friendly guys. And we start talking, and I don't remember their names at all. And their faces, they were kind of those sort of, square jaw-faced, fresh-faced American lads. So, but they were nice guys, and we all decided that we would travel together because I was traveling alone.
We spent a fabulous day on this bird sanctuary island. We snorkeled and drank beer and had barbecue. There was this, one of these girls from Alberta who was like this blonde bombshell, and her buff boyfriend, they were into diving. Pretty much your quintessential perfect vacation day. We're nicely buzzing now from our beers, and Jeff, who's the captain, decides that we should probably leave at around 5 o'clock. By the time we get back to the island, it'll be 8 o'clock at night, and we can go back to the bar.
And so we crossed the Spanish border, and about, half an hour into it, we realized that something had altered, something had changed in the landscape. I don't know whether or not it was some kind of like national holiday or some kind of military holiday or something, but what we noticed was every time that we stopped at a station, there was an inordinate amount of soldiers getting on the train. We thought, what's going on? And nobody seemed to sort of know, so we sort of thought, oh, well, okay.
He put the key in the ignition to turn the motor over so that we could motor out of this little bay. And when he did it, it just kind of made this clicking noise, like the actual engine didn't turn over.
I said to the guys, hey, did any of you guys see where the bathroom was? Because I think, might be a good idea to go. And they said, try at the end of the car. There's usually a bathroom at the end of the car. And I thought, okay, fine. So I went outside of our little cabine, and I walked down the side of the car, and there wasn't a bathroom at the end. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just go into the next car. I opened the door, and I went through the gap area, and I opened the other door, and suddenly I looked up, and, well, it looked like the same train car, but there were no cabines. There were no seats. There were windows, but it was full of soldiers.
Jeff assured us that it wasn't a problem at all because, it's a sailboat. We'll just sail out of the bay. Who needs power anyway? Well, okay, fine. We don't know what we're doing. And none of us know how to sail, by the way. He's the only one that has any kind of sailing experience whatsoever. He put the sails up, and we managed to sail out. The sun sort of sank behind the horizon. Because there was no power on the boat, there were no lights of any kind. And so now we're just careening along in the pitch black. We're sailing along.
It was like a sea of fatigues. I don't know how many there were. Maybe 100, maybe 80. I started to step into the cabine, and I guess when I opened the door, they all turned and they looked at me.
All of a sudden, we hear this popping noise. Then Jeff, who's at the helm, starts screaming, "Oh, fuck, 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 take the sails down," screaming at us, "Drop the anchor." And he's got this little handheld radio, "Mayday, mayday." And the helm wheel is spinning, like out of control.
As I stepped past the first couple of soldiers, there was a smell in the air that I hadn't smelled before on the train, the smell of alcohol. And I think in the back of my brain, maybe I had this moment where I thought, maybe this is not a good idea. Maybe you've done something, stupid.
We don't know how to take the sails down. We don't know how to drop the anchor. None of us know how to do anything. It's pitch black, and we're running around on deck trying to haul on random lines.
But then I thought, I'm in a train full of people. It's a public train. There's American guys 4 feet away from me, 10 feet away from me. So they seemed to part, kind of like, the ocean.
What has happened is that the chain from the helm to the rudder has snapped. So there is no control of the ship.
I never really thought about what I looked like. I probably looked like some kind of American cupcake. I kind of walked through, and I got about 2/3 of the way through, and suddenly one of them stepped out in front of me. I don't know, I probably said something stupid like, buongiorno, or like hola, or flashed him a nice smile, and thinking, obviously he just wants to say something to me. He smiled back, and I thought, great. Everything's okay.
Jeff, who was shouting "Mayday, Mayday" into the radio, was receiving only static back. The ocean floor in that part of Mexico is limestone, so it's like dropping an anchor on cement. It just was dragging around. The flare gun didn't work. It just kind of ejected without doing its flare thing. There weren't enough life jackets either, because we immediately started putting life jackets on when this happened and realized that we were 6 short. Then the storm hits.
Then he sort of looked at me again, like he was looking at something that he wanted to eat or something. I don't know. There was some look in his eye that was not right. And I went to sort of turn around, but at that point in time, I had realized that there was this heat that I felt along my back. And it was bodies coming up behind me. And at that moment, I knew this may be way more difficult to get out of than I thought.
Tell it like it is. Ooh.
And immediately the waves got larger, so they started washing over the deck so that we're getting soaked. We have to hang on so that we're not washed over. And this bombshell girl, who was prone to melodrama anyway, starts screaming, "We're all going to die, we're all going to die."
The guy that had stepped in front of me grabbed the top of my overalls. And before I knew it, I was on my back.
All of a sudden, we start moving, sort of swelling up and moving down.
I was looking up, and all I could see were these faces. Like, they sort of like came in like this over top of you, like a forest.
So we all scrambled down below and were soaking wet. The diving tanks that we'd brought along with us and the snorkeling gear and the empty beer bottles were now crashing from one side of the boat to the other.
It was like all this green fatigue, and you could just smell like body odor, and you could smell alcohol, and I knew I was like fucked. And he knelt down over top of me, undoing my overalls, and he was popping those buckles off. And I was like turning my head from side to side. I was yelling and I was yelling.
We swell up and then we come back down, crashing down on the ocean floor. It's like a gunshot goes off. Crack.
I remember thinking to myself, like, how stupid are you? There's like metal sets of doors, and then there's like a 3-foot air pocket, and there's another set of doors, and then there's a set of doors in our cabine. Like, the Americans are never going to hear you.
You can feel it vibrate through the whole ship. And we're like, oh my God, what was that? Crack.
He got the pants down past my hips, and he grabbed for my Speedo, and he starts pulling on it and pulling on it. And it's just like, it's not giving.
The bombshell, she just burst into song. Amazing grace. Crack. How sweet the sound. Up until this point, I kind of thought that it was going to be a funny story that I was going to tell my dad when I got back home. Crack. But now I'm actually considering the possibility that I might not make it. But now I see.
He's got his knees on the floor so that he can, have mobility, and he's got his hand on the ground, one hand on my shoulder and on the ground.
Every time we hit the ocean floor, we're convinced that this is going to be the time that the hull's going to crack and the water's going to come rushing in, and there's no way in hell all 11 of us are going to get out.
And he pulled as hard as he could, just cut into my shoulders, pulling on it and pulling on it. And it's just like, it's not giving. There's no way. It's not giving. And I'm thinking, he's going to rip this off my body, and that is my last shield. I have nothing left. I remember the knife. And it was completely involuntary.
Dawn comes, and it's like 5 o'clock in the morning. And the storm hasn't let up at all. It's just now that it's slightly gray outside rather than being black. And Jeff comes up with a plan. We need to tear up the back of the boat and steer the rudder manually so we have control of what direction we're going in. He's going to run up on deck and raise one of the sails, and then we'll steer our way back to the island. So we think this is a great plan. And we tear up the back of the boat, and he goes up on the deck, and Ian, who's the big, brawny boyfriend of the bombshell, grabs the rudder. The instant the sail is raised, we can feel it because the boat lurches forward and starts tearing along. And Jeff's up on top yelling, "Left, left!" Ian's, straining and saying, "Well, I am." He's straining, and the veins in his temples, I remember, are popping out. He just keeps screaming, "Left, left, left," and then he says, "Oh, shit," and then we crash.
And I remember my fingers finding the knife, and I remember grabbing the knife, and I remember feeling the knife in my hand and pulling it out and realizing I have a second here. And the next thing I knew, my hand was in his stomach.
things start breaking inside, like the floorboards start popping up. We open the hatch, scramble up the ladder. This girl that was in front of me freaked out. She's in front of me trying to get up the ladder, but she's frozen and won't move. At this point, I was like, I am not going to die on this boat. And I started kicking her and saying, get your ass up the ladder because I am not going to die. We get up on deck and realize that what we've hit is like this beach, kind of sand dune thing, but we've hit it sideways. So the waves are hitting the boat broadside and we're crashing onto the beach. We have to time how it is that we jump off onto the beach because otherwise we're going to go underneath the boat and be smushed.
At the same time, there was this gunshot. It was so loud. And there was this warmth that was running all over my chest.
Tell it like it is.
Everybody stood up. All the faces that were all around me, like chanting and cheering, they just like stood up suddenly, like straight as a board. And he was laying on me, and suddenly the American guys were there. And they pulled him off of me. They pulled me up, and they just put their arms around me, and they carried me out of the train car.
So we all managed to jump onto the beach. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning, and the wind is still raging, and it's pelting sand against our face, and the rain is sideways. And we'd been awake all night, and we had no water and food, so we're a mess. We're huddled up on the beach. We've rigged up this thing with driftwood and a towel where we're sitting behind it to block ourselves from the wind. The storm just keeps raging, and we just keep sitting there for hours and hours. Time just keeps ticking by. And now 1 in the afternoon, and 2 in the afternoon, and 3 in the afternoon. We're like, what is going on? Like, why is no one looking for us?
There was some kind of guy, some kind of official guy. He had shot off the gun inside the train car. Maybe he was a general, I don't know. He was some guy. Maybe he was the train master, I have no idea.
Then, like a movie, this man just comes walking out of the ocean in a wetsuit. Slicked back hair, very built, and he just starts walking towards us on the beach. And as he comes closer, I recognize that he's Pierre, who's a friend of my dad's, who owns the marina.
And the guy came to the car and he said, there will be no problems. At the next stop, we are going to put you on a train back to, where do you need to go? And I said, I want to go to Paris. And the American guys were like, what do you mean there'll be no problems? I mean, this guy tried to rape her, and these are soldiers. And I just sat there. And he said, there will be no problems. And I remember that over and over again, him repeating that. There will be no problems.
He's got this kind of swagger and southern drawl. He's from Louisiana. And he says something like, so y'all want to be saved?
They got me to my cabine. I was covered in blood. I still had the knife in my hand. They couldn't get it out of my hand for I don't know how long.
We're on this little bullet of a powerboat, which is the rescue boat, and we get back to the island.
I went to the bathroom, and I took all my clothes off, and the American guys washed them all for me. And at the next stop, guys came, and they took us off the train, and they put us on the next train, going back the other way, and the American guys stayed with me all the way, and they made a phone call to Philippe, and Philippe came and met me at the train.
And there's my father standing on the dock, and he's just like, oh, the relief on his face. And we hadn't really been talking at all on the rescue boat at all, so we don't really know how Pierre came to find us or anything. But of course, we all reconvene at the bar. We discovered that there was a very good reason that no one was looking for us, and that's because Jeff, the captain, was not actually owner of the boat. He didn't own it. He was being paid by the owner to babysit the boat. He didn't register with the dockmaster because he knew perfectly well he wasn't supposed to take the thing out. It wasn't seaworthy. There were no flares. It was rusted to bits. There was no battery power. All of those things started making perfect sense now. He was eventually charged and put into prison for breaking a series of maritime laws. Had the wind been blowing a different direction, we would have been blown out to sea and more than likely been lost. So Friday the 13th, which was the day the storm hit, is now my lucky day. So every time Friday the 13th comes around, I figure something great's going to happen to me because that's the day that I survived.
I was so happy to get there and see Philippe, and I spent a couple of weeks there. And then I got back on the train and I went traveling again. I never went to Spain again, but I went to Italy and Greece. And then I went home. And Philippe and I never got married. What am I, crazy? No, nobody's ever proposed to me since.
We've got that bond, like that we all went through this craziness together, but I don't have any real desire to keep in touch with them. Like, we just have this thing, this strange 36 hours. I don't know, it's just sort of become a story now.